Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first of what we hope will be a great series of podcasts. This is Claims Corner. Claims Corner is presented bi-monthly, once every other month, then by the Motor Carrier Insurance Education Foundation as a tool to stir interest and to also answer questions related to our transportation claims specialist curriculum, to a curriculum for anyone that's involved in trucking claims. And well, Scott, I've looked at your bio. Of course, I've heard you before, and I know what expertise you have in the area of cargo and theft. And as a national practice leader for transportation at Travelers Insurance for the Inland Marine Group, we welcome Scott Cornell.
Well, thank you very much for having me today, John. I appreciate it. Happy to be here, and it's exciting to be part of the very first one. So thank you for that as well.
Well, you're welcome. So when we were kicking around, what did we want to talk about on our very first podcast? Our claims curriculum committee said cargo theft, because you don't have to be involved very closely, right, with what we're doing to know that that is a very, and it's kind of an unfortunate choice of words, right? It's a hot topic, right?
Yeah, it is a very hot topic right now across the marketplace. It has been for probably coming up on about 2 years right now. You know, we saw the first real uptick that looked like it was going to be consistent probably in late 2022. Then 2023, it just kind of blew up. The numbers really exploded. I think 2022 to 2023, CargoNet reported a 57% increase overall. And keep in mind, when we talk about the numbers, and I'll refer to CargoNet numbers often, that is a sample size. They don't collect all cargo theft. So when you're looking at the CargoNet reports and you see the numbers, that's just what's voluntarily reported to them, or they can get through open source, or that they can gather from certain law enforcement entities, but it only represents a sample size of what's actually going on out there. So it's much bigger than the numbers. But the trending that they put in their reports is fantastic. So it's a very hot topic. It continues to go up. The second quarter numbers just came out, and they've gone up again. So right now, we're not seeing any indication that it's not going to be a hot topic for a while.
So it being cargo theft, very broad subject. My question, as you've had decades of experience in this area, why the explosion over the last couple of years? What have been the factors that have gotten us to this point?
It's a great question, and I think it's an important question because about 3 years ago, cargo theft, and give or take a little bit, roughly 3 years ago, cargo theft in the United States fundamentally changed. What do I mean by that? Well, prior to that time period or that time frame, cargo theft was committed largely by smaller regional organized cargo theft groups. They would range anywhere in size from 5 to 15. A lot of times they were related. They were cousins, uncles, brothers, things like that, and they operated pretty regionally. And that's why when you looked at a heat map, it's one of the reasons when you looked at a heat map, you saw very specific concentrations of where the cargo theft was happening across the country. And they were largely unsophisticated. Straight theft was their number one method. They went out, they physically stole the cargo where it sat. They rarely used strategic theft methods. We did see some of it, but they pretty much stuck to straight theft for most of what they did. And they would sell it flea markets. They would launder it a little bit and try and sell it where they could. They had some fences that would buy, half loads, full loads. They would sell it online. And it was the same people over and over again, the same groups over and over again. And if you were in the industry, if you were investigating cargo theft, or you were law enforcement for cargo theft or anything like that, you kind of knew who were in these groups, where they operated, how they operated. You understood their methods. And about 3 years ago, that changed. Those groups still exist, but they're not the big players anymore. It has moved and become an international crime now. So the industry has reported seeing cargo theft attempts from 22 different countries. And these rings are organized and based in foreign countries. And so now you go from having this small, more regional or domestic market where the cargo thieves can sell freight, which has a finite demand, to this international demand that they can just move the freight all over the planet. They can launder it, they can relabel it, and they can make it look legitimate so that they can sell it in one country after another. So now we've gone from this smaller regional domestic demand for this freight to this global demand, and that has helped the numbers explode.
You used the phrase theft strategy, and I mean, so this has become quite sophisticated of an industry, hasn't it? Then the theft strategy industry.
It has. So there's two real methods of cargo theft that we talk about pretty regularly in the industry. And one is straight theft, which is what I mentioned that those regional crews use quite often, which is where they go straight out to the freight where it sits, truck stops, parking lots, drop lots, industrial areas where they park it on the side of the roads, you name it. And they physically are on site or on location and they steal it. The second method, which is where cargo theft has really exploded over the last 3 years, is what we call strategic theft. And that's when they basically trick you into giving them the freight. And they do that through various methods: identity theft, fictitious pickups, double brokering scams. And because that does not require them to be on site, it does not require them to go physically out and steal the freight where it sits, they can now target the freight anywhere they want. So what we're seeing is we still see those same hotspots: Southern California, Dallas, Houston, Florida, Memphis, Illinois. We still see those same hotspots. We're also seeing a spread of cargo theft across the country that we have not seen before. So now if I'm a cargo thief and I'm working in a foreign country overseas, and I see a load of freight that I want to target that's in Omaha, Nebraska, I don't care that it's in Omaha, Nebraska. It doesn't need to be near the port. It doesn't need to be near the industrial centers that are closer to the ports or to the big cities. I can target that load because it doesn't matter to me. Cargo theft, we kind of say it a little bit tongue in cheek, but cargo theft has become a work from home career choice for these organized rings, right? They can be anywhere and they can steal the freight anywhere it is. Just doesn't matter. So, and when they target those, and I apologize for rambling, John, but when they target when they target those areas where there traditionally hasn't been cargo theft, people aren't going to have their guard up because they haven't encountered it before. If you're in that Southern California area and you're moving freight in Southern California, that's a hotspot for cargo theft. If you're in Omaha, Nebraska, you may have never heard of or seen cargo theft before.
Well, I think you've just really enunciated one of the big trends is a geographic explosion of where freight is going to be involved in a theft. So what you're really saying contradicts traditional thought process about where thefts occur, and
absolutely,
we had better be aware of it when we're underwriting risk or where we are risk, right? So if the geographic aspect of theft has exploded, I'm assuming that you've got some similar thoughts about commodities and what's being targeted and how it's being, as you say, moved all around the world after cargo is stolen.
Absolutely. I think I say this, I use air quotes when I say when cargo theft is normal, which I know is sort of like saying jumbo shrimp, right? When cargo theft is normal, food and beverage will be your number one targeted commodity. Cargo thieves are really good at two things outside of their ability to steal freight. They're good at two things. One is they know what to steal and when to steal it. And the second is they're really good at return on investment. We can touch on that later. But if we look at what to steal and when to steal it, if we go back historically a little bit, and I'll go back even a little bit further to make the point even clearer. 2006, 2007, early 2008, electronics, number one stolen commodity in the country. The economy was booming. People had money for luxury items. So cargo thieves stole luxury items because that's what people were buying. 2008 to 2010, we see a downturn in the economy. People don't spend as much money on luxury items, so they switched over to food and beverage. They stuck with food and beverage in large part from 2010 to 2019. 2020, we had the pandemic. Everybody's at home. Household goods becomes the number one stolen commodity. Why? We're all building home offices. We're all working from home. Kids are educating from home. We're building home gyms. You name it. We're trying to make home someplace that's easier to be all day, every day. And so they target those home goods. 2021, we heard there was going to be a shortage on chips, and we were all still working from home, and kids were educating from home, needed tablets and laptops and things like that. So electronics became number one for 2021. 2022, things start to normalize again. Food and beverage comes back into the number one spot. As we sit here today, food and beverage remains in the number one spot. So the point there is they like food and beverage for multiple reasons. The evidence disappears because it's consumed in a short period of time. It's much harder to track and trace. There's no barcode on frozen chicken. You don't activate a warranty on energy drinks over the internet, so we can't ping the location of those types of things. And they're very easy to move. They're very easy to launder and move back into the supply chain. And you have a very short window. If you're an investigator that's trying to do a recovery on a load of food and beverage of any type, whether it's frozen seafood or meat or energy drinks or alcohol or any of those things, you have a very short window to recover that load. And even if you recover that load, you're going to have some issues around, does it get put back into the supply chain? Does it not? Things like that. Televisions, laptops, gaming consoles, you can chase for months. And you may not get the whole load back, but you can get a partial load back, right? So they like food and beverage for those reasons, but they are able to pivot very quickly to whatever is either really popular or that they think is going to be in high demand because of a shortage or some other reason.
So the point would be, if you're in class and you have a bent for the underworld and you have an interest in macroeconomics, cargo theft might be the career for you. I mean, that's what I'm kind of hearing.
I'm not going to point anybody. I'm not going to point anybody in the direction of cargo theft as a career choice. We need more people combating cargo theft. Let's recommend that as your field of choice, because there's going to be plenty of it. So there's going to be a need for people to combat it.
Yeah, which is my true point. You've spent your career not actually just looking at cargo theft, but looking at strategies that work to prohibit cargo theft and to mitigate the exposures. Tell us some things that have worked well for you, and pretend you were the only expert. You said, I want to tell you to do these things because this is going to help you. This is going to help prevent these thefts. What would you say?
Yeah, so we work, here at Travelers, we work very closely with our clients on prevention. I think one of the things that I preach most often is a layered approach. And that layered approach has to start with good process and procedures. You can go out and buy technology, and you can go out and buy hard locking devices for your trailers and track devices and all these other things. But if you don't have good process and procedures in place to utilize all those tools that you implement, they'll ultimately fail because the process fails. So if we concentrate on strategic theft, the first thing I would say when it comes to cargo theft and cargo theft prevention in general is it has to become, I'll back up for a second, John. There's no indication that cargo theft is going to come back down. So one of the common questions I get is this a temporary bump? And when will it come back down? And my answer to that is, unless something drastically changes, don't expect it to come back down. I do think at some point we will level off and there will be a new norm, but it's not going to come back down because once it became an internationally based type of sophisticated crime, the demand just went through the roof, right? So if we assume that that's correct, if we assume that there's going to be a new level, a new norm at some point, then just like safety became part of the culture of doing business for the transportation industry a couple decades ago, freight security now has to become part of the culture of the way you do business. And that's part of that process and procedures that I talk about. It has to be part of every aspect of your business. In other words, you can't have a sales team that is out trying to win a contract to move highly targeted freight in highly targeted areas that is not talking to the security team or the loss prevention team about, okay, if we sign this contract, if we sign this client, how are we going to secure the freight? Is there going to be additional cost to securing that freight? And if so, then that needs to be part of the contract and the negotiation and like that. So it has to become part of the culture of the way you do business from the start of the deal to the day the freight is delivered at the consignee's door. And so process and procedures around how do we work together internally? How do we implement good procedures, good process? How do we make it part of the culture of the way we do business? Are we training our staff, our entire staff, even if it's on a very high cursory level about cargo theft, so that there's a little bit of a spidey sense that activates if something just seems wrong, because they are aware of the problem. They do know what is going on in the world of cargo theft and things like that. So you get into that process and procedure, which includes training, good instructions on how to vet carriers if we're talking about strategic theft, putting a good process in place on that carrier vetting within your organization. And then you get to layer two. And layer two is the introduction of some kind of prevention tools. There are several companies that have come out recently in the industry that will help you verify carriers, that will help you identify, any red flags as to, hey, this might be somebody trying to commit identity theft. This might be somebody that's associated with, nefarious activities, things like that. And it can help you verify if the person you think you're doing business with is the right person, is in fact that person. And that's the most critical part, is knowing exactly who you're doing business with, because they are so good at stealing the identity and pretending to be somebody, or actually out there purchasing MC numbers, which we've seen them doing over the last couple of years by the hundreds or thousands, so that they look legitimate on paper, and that they're actually a trucking company with an MC number and a DOT number, right? And then you get to that third layer, which can involve technologies like covert tracking that you're going to implement in the process of moving the freight and things like that. But again, if you invest in good covert tracking, and there are companies out there that sell tracking devices, and there are also companies out there that have the tracking devices and will monitor the tracking devices for you and have a response planned around anything that could go wrong and things like that. So you can do that internally, or you can contract that out. But if you have invested in that type of technology on either of those last two layers, but you don't have a good process in place on how you're going to use those and how you're going to respond to those, then they'll ultimately fail. So you have to have that layered approach all the way through the process. And it really does, for the entire industry, it has to become part of the culture of the way you operate in the supply chain going forward, just like safety is.
So there's no laissez-faire approach to freight security that is going to work today or in the future. And I hope that people have been listening to you loud and clear with regard to that, because it's like every other aspect of risk mitigation. If you have the right attitude, the right discipline, and the right procedures, then maybe you've got a fighting chance, right?
Yeah.
I was wondering this, as we kind of close out. The insurance industry covers loss. We pay loss. We charge the premium, and so in some respects, if the loss is double, we just double the premium and say, what do you want? What else do you want us to do? But the leading insurers do a good job with their clients to help them improve. And I know that's a big part of what you do at Travelers. So give us a little bit of insight into how you take that approach.
I think for us, it starts with an understanding that we want to have good, close relationships with our clients. We want to have a partnership that reflects a desire on both parties to mitigate loss, and then have a long-term relationship where we know the efforts that a client is putting forward. We help them with those efforts. A lot of that for cargo and for transportation starts with our SIG team. So in 2005, we started our special investigations group, and it's a group of investigators. Currently, we're at 14 investigators across the country that are dedicated specialists in cargo theft investigations, and they're on call 24/7. That's where I got my start, largely at Travelers. Myself and another gentleman, DZ Patterson, started that team in 2005. Before I moved on to lead transportation here. And that team from 2009 to 2024 has recovered over $100 million in stolen goods for our clients. So very impactful on that ability to respond, recover, investigate cargo theft. And we're very proud of that number and their accomplishments. But even more so, that team works with our clients on prevention, on teaching them this is what's happening today, where you haul freight with regard to the freight that you haul and how you haul it. And we will work with our clients closely to teach them, educate them on the theft trends, what's happening, where it's happening, and then do an evaluation of what they have in place, and then make suggestions, offer resources. We recently started our transportation management innovation page that was launched on July 9th, and that has a bunch of vendors on there that we've vetted that we think offer either good services or good tools to the industry to help our clients. So we try and bring a culture, if you will, like we talked about, right? We try and bring a culture here at Travelers to our clients and help them build their own culture. And in doing so, we tend to have good long-term relationships, and I think we bring a lot to the table for our clients.
Well, your success is a beacon for the insurance industry because honestly, when we do things very well as an insurance industry, then we're quite helpful to the ultimate customer. You've got, you don't want a theft, but theft recovery, look for a carrier that is an expert in theft recovery. And loss mitigation, let's prevent the loss to start with, and here's a path that will be helpful. That's another expertise that you guys are legion to display. So Scott, go ahead.
And John, I think that's so important to offer solutions. I think I've never been of the mindset, we have never been of the mindset over here that, hey, we're just going to give you a policy and you're going to pay the premium, and we're both going to just exist in that way. We just have never operated that way. It's about, thank you for being a customer. How can we help you? And what services can we bring so that we can develop that long-term relationship? And I think that's important for the industry to do.
All right, I've got a final question for you.
Sure.
Give us, if you had to put into words in just one or two sentences, how you would approach cargo theft as the property and casualty insurance industry to the trucking insurance industry, what would you say?
Again, I think it's a culture. I think, first of all, it's a team sport. So I have a good friend, Keith Lewis with CargoNet, who always says, hey, this is a team sport at this point, right? Everybody has to be on board. So shippers, freight brokers, trucking industry, we have to learn that all of those entities play an important part in it. It can't be freight brokers having one way of approaching it and trucking having another way and shippers having another way. Now, certainly, because each one of them play a different role in the transportation industry, they're going to do some things differently. But the point being, they all have to come together and communicate very well and understand that this is an industry issue and that we have to tackle it as an industry. And we can't just think that somebody else is going to do it. So I really think that advice that my friend gives is that, hey, this is a team sport. It has to become part of the culture of the supply chain at this point, and we really need to do that going forward.
Well, Scott, I'll tell you something. We're grateful for the advice you've given. I got one last thing to say to you. You're in trouble. You know why? I'm going to tell you why you're in trouble. You've done such a good job that your phone is going to ring. I don't know if I'd answer it if I'm calling, because when I'm calling, you're going to have to come back and teach more about this very important aspect of transportation insurance to the folks at MCIF that are very they're very dedicated to learning how to do things right. So thank you for your expertise and insight with regard to this podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
We're grateful.